Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we are back, and surprise, we're doing another ranking video. Now today's ranking video is going to be on the Painkiller series. Now the Painkiller series is a series of first-person shooters primarily released for the PC, and there's some pretty old school shooters here. They all see you just killing hordes and hordes of enemies in a pretty old school fashion where it is pretty mindless and it's almost point and click, how you just literally shoot at everything that moves. In these games there's some mindless fun in here, but I thought it'd be fun if we'd rank all the Painkiller games. There's actually a fair bit of Painkiller games. There's actually there's eight of these fucking things. 8 Painkiller games. Yes, there's been really 8 Painkiller games. I know that seems kind of ridiculous, but hey, there's 8 right now. There might be more in the future. Who knows? Either way, let's get started on this ranking video. And don't forget to like, share, sub, share, all that stuff. Anyway, let's get down to what the worst Painkiller game is. And here we have Painkiller Resurrection. Now, Painkiller Resurrection really is the bottom of the barrel when it comes to Painkiller games and first-person shooters in general, as this game honestly is just a horrid mess. Released in 2009 as a standalone expansion to the original Painkiller, it's clear there wasn't any quality control done here, but regardless, we have this piece of crap. So the game stars Bill, who basically is like a killer or something. He's like a hitman. He's going to blow up a car when a bus shows up randomly full of innocent people, and it blows up and, well, everyone dies. And so Bill goes into some purgatory, but he can redeem himself by going after one of Lucifer's generals. The story and the comic book style drawings aren't even that bad with this game. It's the gameplay that truly is horrid. The game fails to do anything interesting or new for the Painkiller series, especially at this point in time. The game does not appear to have any original assets at all, as it uses everything from the original game other than maybe this one new weapon where it's like a multi-state gun, I guess. That's like one of the only new things in the entire game. So the game already is dropping the ball on doing anything new for the Painkiller series, as it really does nothing new. It's exactly the same as the previous games. The only difference here is that the level design has just become absolutely atrocious. These are some of the worst levels I've ever seen in a first-person shooter. The first level in particular is just god-awful, with this horrible platforming up these stairs that like invert or something. It's so stupid. All the levels are truly terrible, as it feels like you're just kind of glitching your way through these levels. The markers don't make any sense. It ruins the enemy pathfinding because these levels are just horrible, and it's just a slog to get through the entire game. Ultimately, the level designs are nonsensical. The game's not long. I didn't want it to be long. It's very dull when it actually does work. It does, again, nothing new for the series, and it's one of the worst first-person shooters probably ever made, and is not worth playing. The next game we have on our list is Painkiller Redemption, which is also a standalone expansion to the original Painkiller that came out many years later. The game actually sees Belial teaming up with Daniel, the main characters from OVERDOSE and the original game respectively. They come to team up to just kill a bunch of demons, I guess. The biggest thing about this game is that it has weapons and enemies from OVERDOSE and the original Painkiller. However, this game does drop the ball in a number of different aspects. Just like Resurrection, it fails to actually have anything new. It uses only previous assets from previous Painkiller games, and instead of trying to have its own level design, instead they decided to take all the multiplayer maps from the original Painkiller and just make those levels. Yeah, they section off tons of little parts of these multiplayer maps into levels where you just kill tons and tons of enemies, and it's about as mindless as it gets, with no new weapons and, again, no new enemies. It's, again, very mindless. It goes on far too long, and it leads to a very repetitive game, as you're just stuck in the same environment for minutes at a time and nothing changes. You'll kill over 1,000 enemies in these levels, but you will have only changed areas in these maps maybe like 5 or 6 times. It's very poorly paced, it gets very bland quickly, and it's not a fun time. I wouldn't say it's one of the worst first-person shooters ever made like the previous game, but it's not exactly good, and again, it does nothing new for the series, and it doesn't even do what it's trying to do well. It's just all around not a good game. The next Painkiller game we have is Painkiller Recurring Evil. Now, Painkiller Recurring Evil is another standalone expansion to the original Painkiller. However, unlike the 2 previous games, this game actually does have some original assets. It doesn't have very many, but it does have a few. It was made by the people who made Resurrection, and it's certainly a step in the right direction, but it's still not that great of a game. And it does see Bill come back from Resurrection, now the leader of Purgatory, or like a defender of it, or it's something like that. The gameplay is your standard Painkiller affair where you shoot everything that moves. However, this game does actually have some competently designed levels, and by that I mean it works. The pathfinding usually works. The enemies are, again, nothing actually really new to the Painkiller series, and there's not even any new weapons, but I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. It does work as a game. I can say at least I got like 2 hours of mindless fun out of this one before I got just ultimately bored of it and probably put it down a few hours later, and that was it really with this game. There's not all that much to it. Oh, and the frame rate's terrible for some reason a lot of the time. It really brings nothing new to the table again, but it is playable, and it is sufficient enough that I can say that it's not one of the worst shooters ever made, but I would not really recommend this game to anybody, even Painkiller fans. The next game we have is Painkiller Overdose. Now, Painkiller Overdose is, surprise, a standalone expansion to the original Painkiller. However, this was the first one and is the best of the standalone expansions. I wouldn't necessarily say it's that good of a game or a great first-person shooter by any means, but it's not a total piece of crap like most of the other games on this list. It actually does have an original story that sees Belial, a half-demon, half-angel, being freed and, well, going on a rampage and just kind of killing everyone for all those who damned him in the past. And it isn't that terrible. Belial isn't that bad of a character. He is kind of annoying, but he's actually got a personality, which is something I can say over pretty much any other character in this series. And the gameplay as a whole isn't the worst thing. The biggest thing is that the game actually features a number of new assets, and it's not all just ripped from the original Painkiller. Only a little bit is ripped from the original Painkiller. There's actually new weapon skins for everything, and a few new weapons in general, which are fun to use. The shooting is pretty decent enough, and the enemies that you fight are actually alright. The level design is passable, and everything feels pretty alright. The hit detection is oftentimes kind of questionable and can be a bit wonky. There are a bit of bugs in the game, and some of the levels aren't exactly great. And the game does have not very good bosses, but you know what? There's something original here. They clearly tried, which I can give effort for that, and it's not the worst Painkiller. The only thing I can say is that the game definitely does drag on, and it does actually get a bit stale and repetitive towards the end, even for Painkiller standards, as it just doesn't really have enough variety to keep me going all the way through. I did finish it, but I didn't exactly have the greatest time finishing it. I looked at this one with my buddy FrameRaider, and we both agreed that it's not very good overall. And while I could maybe recommend it to Painkiller fans, everybody else should really just steer clear from this game, as it's not exactly enduring. The next game on the list is a bit of an interesting one. It is Painkiller Hell Wars, released exclusively for the Xbox. Now, this is a port, essentially, but it's kind of its own game, of Painkiller 1 and its expansion Battle Out of Hell. It takes most of the levels from those two games and puts it together to have its own kind of unique experience, and the game is, well, it's alright. I can say that it's definitely not the best of both worlds, and when it comes to versions of the original Painkiller, this is definitely the most inferior version you could play, as it's not only the most watered down as it is missing some levels, but this really is just the worst way to play the original game. There are load times like everywhere, even in the middle of levels. Again, levels missing, and the controls are not very good at all, especially when it comes to switching weapons. This is just abysmal. They should have made it like Serious Sam Xbox, but really did not do that at all. Due to this, the pacing is pretty much shot in all these levels, as some levels take way longer to finish for a number of different reasons, and it really just kind of kills the entire pacing. There's a boss fight missing. Some of the levels are locked off unless you're on the harder difficulties, which really doesn't make any sense, and the game overall just doesn't actually feel very well to play with a controller. Like, this game was a curious experiment, but it really wasn't anything more than that. And I really can't recommend this to even the most diehard of Painkiller fans, as if you just play the original, it's way better than this. This honestly feels like when Quake 2 got ported to the Nintendo 64, or like Duke Nukem 64, where like it's just such an inferior like console port of a nice PC first-person shooter that it's really not worth recommending or playing. And I honestly just kind of included it on here because I actually have played it, I played with my buddy Frame Raider. We both reviewed it on his channel, and yeah, I don't really recommend it. The next game on the list is Painkiller Hell and Damnation, and unlike all the other games on this list so far, this is the first game I can say that this is actually a pretty decent to good game. Painkiller Hell and Damnation, it's alright. It's a remake of the original Painkiller and Painkiller Battle Out of Hell. While it is a remake, it does actually have its own unique things, as it does have a unique story, a unique new weapon or two, and some new enemies. There's even a little bit of differences in some of these levels. It's not a complete one-to-one remake. They also don't include every level to be remade. There are some levels that are actually missing from the original, which is really odd, but in the end I think that this is actually a pretty decently fun game. It plays about as well as the original, which is good, and it's about as mindless and fun as the original. It does have a decent amount of variety. I think the Battle Out of Hell levels have been put in pretty well, and the story actually does take an interesting turn or two, which is different enough. It has pretty much everything that the original Painkiller had, but in a bit shinier graphics. I mean, even for the time, I wouldn't say the graphics were exactly amazing, but they're certainly better than the originals, I can give it that. And you're still just killing everything that moves, collecting the souls, blowing shit up, maybe getting some tarot cards, the good stuff. And this game, it isn't exactly mind-blowing. It's nothing new to the Painkiller series. It's actually the latest Painkiller game, and it was on the 360, but hey, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, it could have been those previous games. And if you're looking for a decently fun first-person shooter, you could do a lot worse. So the next game, and the second best Painkiller game in my opinion, is Painkiller Battle Out of Hell. Battle Out of Hell is the expansion to Painkiller, like the original Painkiller, and you do need the original Painkiller to actually play this. However, they're sold together nowadays. Now, Painkiller Battle Out of Hell really took what made the original Painkiller fun and actually just heavily expands on it. They add way more levels. Like, this game has a decent amount of levels considering it's just an expansion, a couple new weapons, tons of new enemies, and a couple new gimmicks here and there as well. The game actually has some pretty good level design. It might arguably, if not just straight, does have the best level design in the entire series, as there's a lot of unique areas and just kind of gimmicks they throw into these levels to really keep the variety up. That's one thing about Battle Out of Hell, is that the variety is very high. You're pretty much killing different enemies almost every single level. A lot of these levels have different gimmicks, and the new weapons they introduce are actually really fun to use. It's a very competent shooter, and it was the last Painkiller game actually made by People Can Fly, the original developers. All these other games have not been by the original developers, and I can see why they left the series, but, you know, this game, it was still pretty fun. I have no problem recommending this to anybody who likes first-person shooters, as I think Battle Out of Hell is, again, a good expansion. It really expands on the original game. It even continues the story and has a decent enough story in itself, and yeah, the cliffhanger ending is pretty stupid, but I had a fun time with Battle Out of Hell. And what do I think the best Painkiller game of them all is? It's the original. The original Painkiller is ultimately the only really great game that's on this entire list, and the original Painkiller is actually still a really fun time. Honestly though, could it really have been any of the other Painkillers? Like, all of the other Painkillers are derivative of this original game. A lot of them use the original assets, they use the original levels, they use the weapons, they use pretty much everything that this game created. And so with that in mind, I guess this was like the leader of them all. This is the one that really started them all, and it's the best one. If it wasn't for this one, there wouldn't be all those other games on the list, and that's not the case for every game series, I assure you that. It's really that this game is just the predominant game for Painkiller. All the other Painkiller games really have tried to replicate what this game did, and none of them are as good as this one. This game was the most original, the game with the most variety, the game with a ton of different enemies to kill, all these weapons, and they were all new, I might add. The game looked great when it came out. It's very mindless, but it is very fun. The game can be decently challenging. It has a lot of unique weapons that all have dual functions that are really cool. The game has really nice music, something the other games that I can't really comment on. I don't really think the music is very good in most of the Painkiller games, but I actually like the music in this game, but I know that's a bit of a subjective opinion. There's a real high amount of variety with the levels, not only aesthetically, but just going through them as well. The same goes for the enemies. You'll rarely fight the same enemies in more than one level, like if at all. You fight different enemies just about every level. Sure, most of them just rush you and you just kind of gun them down, but hey, it's different enemies. I mean, it's still pretty fun to just mindlessly kill everything. Like, you just really just go around blasting everything, and you know what, some days you really just can't ask for more. I can say it's definitely not the thinking man's first-person shooter, even compared to other shooters that are kind of similar, like Serious Sam, as this game is really just as absolutely mindless as it gets. I mean, really the whole series is, but this might be the most mindless, but this is also the best one. Like, if you've had a bad day, or just kind of out of it, and you need a mindless, just fun time, play this. This is a good time. Now, when it comes to Painkiller as a series, I wouldn't exactly say it's the best series. It's not even a very good series, to be honest, of first-person shooters. Really, Painkiller, what it is they had a breakout game on the PC, the original. They had a decent expansion, and then things pretty much just fell off. There was a bunch of shitty expansions, a remake that was half decent, and a pretty lame-ass Xbox port, and that's pretty much the series as a whole. But I played all of them. I had a fun time with most of them, except the really shit ones. And you know, I mean, yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, never mind. Honestly, hope you guys enjoyed the video. What's your favorite Painkiller game? Just kidding. Everyone knows it's the original. The original is the best one. And have a good Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter, New Year's. I don't know. Whatever holiday's closest to you. Have a good one.